I am Ndeloh Esther. You are listening to Cameroon Link Radio. Here we are going to continue to talk about the principles and recommendations on HIV and infant feeding. The 2010 World Health Organization Principles and Recommendations on HIV and infant feeding, valid and updated. The World Health Organization Recommendation on HIV and infant feeding from 2010, Table 3, World Health Organization 2010b, remain valid except as noted. These guidelines revised only the World Health Organization recommendation related to HIV and infant feeding, given priority by the Guideline Development Group. Table 3. Principles and recommendations from the 2010 Guidelines on HIV and infant feeding. Balancing the principles. Balancing HIV prevention with protection from other causes of child mortality. Infant feeding practices recommended to mothers known to be living with HIV should support the greatest likelihood of HIV-free survival of their children and not harm the health of mothers. To achieve this, giving priority to preventing HIV transmission needs to be balanced with meeting the nutritional requirements of infants and protecting them from known HIV morbidity and mortality. This remains invalid. Note: integrating HIV intervention into maternal and child health services. National authorities should aim to integrate HIV testing, care, and treatment interventions for all women into maternal and child health services. Such intervention should include access to CD4 count testing and appropriate ART or prophylaxis for the women's health and to prevent the mother-to-child transmission of HIV. This remains valid and it should be noted. Certain national or subnational recommendation for infant feeding in the context of HIV. National or subnational health authorities should decide whether health services will mainly conceal or support mothers known to be living with HIV to either breastfeed and receive ARV drug intervention or avoid breastfeeding as the strategy that will most likely give infants the greatest chance of HIV-free survival. The decision should be based on international recommendation and consideration of the socio-economic and cultural context of the population served by maternal and child health services, the availability and quality of health services, the local epidemiology, including the HIV prevalence among pregnant women and the main causes of maternal and child undernutrition and infant and child mortality. This remains valid and it should be noted. When ARV drugs are not immediately or available, breastfeeding may still provide infants born to mothers living with HIV a greater chance to have HIV-free survival. Every effort should be made to accelerate access to ARV drugs for both maternal health and preventing HIV transmission to infants. While ARV drugs intervention are being scaled up, national authorities should not deter from recommending that mothers living with HIV as the most appropriate infant feeding practice in their setting. This remains valid and it should be noted. We are reading from the guidelines number 6, updates on HIV and infant feeding. The principles continue. Even when ARV drugs are not available, mothers should be consulted to exclusively breastfeeding. In the 6 months of life and continue breastfeeding thereafter, unless environmental and social circumstances are safe for and supportive of replacement feeding. In circumstances in which ARV drugs are unlikely to be available, such as acute emergencies, breastfeeding of HIV-exposed infants is also recommended to increase survival. Informing mothers known to be living with HIV about infant feeding alternatives. Pregnant women and mothers known to be living with HIV should be informed of the infant feeding practice recommended by the national or subnational authority to improve the HIV-free survival of HIV-exposed infants and health of mothers living with HIV, and inform that there are alternatives that mothers might want to adopt. This remains valid and it should be noted. Providing services to specifically support mothers to appropriately feed their infants. Skilled counseling and support in appropriate infant feeding practice, and ARV drug interventions to promote the HIV-free survival of infants should be available to all pregnant women, updated to former recommendation, which is seen in recommendation 2 2016. Avoiding harming infant feeding practice in general population. Counseling and support to mothers known to be living with HIV and health messaging to the general population should be carefully delivered to avoid undermining optimal breastfeeding practices among the general population. This remains valid and it should be noted. Advising mothers who are HIV uninfected or whose HIV status is unknown. Mothers who are known to be HIV uninfected or whose status is unknown should be concealed to exclusive breastfeeding concealed to exclusively breastfeed their infants for the first 6 months of life, and then to introduce complementary food while continuing breastfeeding for 24 months or beyond. Mothers whose status is unknown should be offered HIV testing. Mothers who are HIV uninfected should be consulted about the ways to prevent HIV infection and about the services that are available, such as family planning, to help them in remain uninfected. These remain valid and it should be noted. Investing in improving infant feeding practices in the context of HIV. Governments, other stakeholders, and donors should greatly increase their commitment to and resources for implementing the global strategy for their infant and young child feeding. The United Nations HIV and infant feeding framework for priority action and the global scale-up of the prevention of mother-to-child transmission of HIV to effectively prevent infants from becoming infected with HIV, postnatally improve HIV-free survival, and achieve relevant goals of the United Nations General Assembly Special Session on HIV and AIDS. This remains valid and it should be noted. Recommendations continue. 1. Ensuring mothers receive the care they need. Mothers known to be living with HIV should be provided with lifelong ART or ARV drug interventions to reduce HIV transmission through breastfeeding in accordance with World Health Organization recommendation. This remains valid and it should be noted. In settings in which national authorities have decided that the maternal and child health services will mainly promote and support breastfeeding and ARV drug intervention as the strategy that will most likely give infants born to mothers known to be living with HIV the greatest chance of HIV-free survival. Number 2. With breastfeeding practices and for how long? Mothers known to be living with HIV and whose infants are HIV uninfected or of unknown HIV status should exclusively breastfeed their infants for the first 6 months of life, introducing appropriate complementary food thereafter, and continue breastfeeding for the first 12 months of life. Breastfeeding should then always stop once a nutritional, adequate and safe diet without milk can be provided. The 2016 guideline revises the recommended duration of breastfeeding and HIV treatment. See recommendation 1/2016. The 2010 World Health Organization principles and recommendation on HIV infants feeding valid and updated. You are listening to Cameroon Link Radio by Ndeloh, Esther, and assisted by Njanking Achenyi. And we are here to say that on the point of breastfeeding as a whole, we know that breastfeeding is the best that we all as mothers we can give to our children. It is very necessary to breastfeed your child because when you breastfeed your child, the child is not contaminated by many venereal diseases, and hardly will the child be ill. So we are advising mothers out there to focus on exclusive breastfeeding for at least 6 months before giving your child even water or any other food which you choose to. We can see that nowadays, even in our societies, there is a great difference between children who were well breastfed for 6 months and those who were not well breastfed for the 6 months. And when your child is well breastfed, the child normally, even he or she is very intelligent and reasons so well, rather than you going out there buying milk, buying artificial milk. It instead costs you a lot of money. This money which we use in buying artificial milk could either be used maybe to finance our children in school and do other things, but we rather use this money to buy artificial milk. With the natural milk which God has given to us, which is not costly and cannot be sold, we can give this milk to our children and they will be fine till after 6 months, the first 6 months. Then you can choose whatever to give to your child. But as for 6 months, we encourage you all out there who are watching us to encourage breastfeeding, because it is the best that your child deserves. And no one should ever deceive you out there that breastfeeding will make your breast to fall or will make you to look older. Breastfeeding your child for even 1 year, 6 months, and even 2 years, it is not a great deal. It costs you just nothing, and it also helps in family planning, because when you're breastfeeding your child, it helps in the spacing of your children. And I am speaking out of experience, and I'm calling on all the mothers out there to encourage breastfeeding, because breast milk is the best that a woman can give to your child. So I really want to say breastfeeding is the best, and no one should deceive you that breastfeeding is not the best. So we are calling all the men out there, the men in Cameroon, out of Cameroon, to join hands and support women, because when you join hands and support women, this will make breastfeeding to be more developed in our world, and it will encourage breastfeeding more and more. So notwithstanding, thanks for your kind attention. Ndeloh, Esther.